So kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, he has a knack for targeting markets. I think what's daunting to independent musicians, certainly the musicians that I talk to mostly, um, is that the in the old industry you could be a musician. That's all you needed to be. At least that was the outward appearance, right? So you had these, whatever band it was. All they did was play music, and somebody else handled the business side of things. That's very clearly no longer the case. You're completely in charge of both. You really got to stay on top of it in order to succeed. And you made a really good point about um, Beaver, how you bumped into, which is an interesting story, but which maybe we should get into just a little bit. But
Sure.
you asked him a question that was, did you? It was something along the lines of if he was handling his business, who was handling his business for him?
I said, how are you? I asked Justin Bieber. I said, how are you planning your financial future?
Yep.
And this was at a press conference at the Grammys after I had accidentally bumped into him in the restroom, and anyway, he said, he was kind of taken aback, and then he said, "Oh, I have a business manager."
Mm.
But yeah, you can say, okay, he's 17 years old, whatever. But by the time Jay-Z was 17, or Sean Combs was 17,
Yeah.
they were already very entrepreneurial, and they were working. I mean, learning. I mean, in Jay-Z's case, learning the informal market of supply and demand on the street.
Yep.
And Diddy was already kind of honing his craft, about to go to Howard University, where he would then become an intern. Working with Andre Harrell, and really kind of getting a taste for the business. So,
Yeah.
yeah, 17, but maybe it's time to start paying attention, to how the business of it works, because
Sure.
that's, I mean, if you look at the most successful guys, that's how, and girls, I mean, that's how they get there.
That's how they get there. No, you're absolutely correct on that. I think, and it's what's nice is that from the independent music standpoint, you can look at the majors and see where they've gone wrong and say this is not the tact I want to take. So if you've got one of these groups like say Bieber, who's out there and he's top of the market right now. That's fantastic. We got to realize for those people that don't realize this, you're crazy. He's backed by millions and millions and millions of dollars that are pushing him. The day they don't like his look, his sound, he's gone. And if he doesn't have anything in his back pocket in terms of business acumen, he's going to have real trouble. Honing your skills as a musician is great. Honing your skills as a business person, I think, especially now in the industry, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, but this seems to be critical to success. Devoid if you're a major label or independent, self-production, it doesn't make a difference. And what's really interesting is Jay-Z at the very, very earliest part of his career, and maybe we should talk a little bit about, we've alluded to what he was doing prior to getting into music. Um, I think that early portion of his business career is really important to see where this guy came from and where he ended up. Uh, it's it's an unusual path, but not one that isn't chosen by a lot of people. So before I burst the bubble, why don't you talk a little bit about how he started, and then get into like Rockefeller.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, Jay-Z started out on the streets selling crack in his teenage years. And he really kind of got into it in his late teenage years when he moved down to Trenton, moved in with a friend of his from the Marcy Housing Projects who
Yeah.
had moved down to Trenton. It was kind of, I guess you could say, a less sophisticated market down there. It was less efficient, in that at the time all of the big imports of cocaine came through New York to the Eastern Seaboard, and so you would get it in New York. Somebody would sneak it through customs, and then the farther you went, the scarcer the supply was, and
Okay.
thus the more you could charge for it. And so in Trenton, it wasn't quite as efficient a market, and there weren't as many competitors, I guess, as there were in New York. And so Jay-Z kind of went to work. And then he and his friend kind of started moving farther south into Maryland and even farther south. Basically, I mean, you could look at it as kind of laws of supply and demand kind of thing.
Mhm.
I mean, as far as um, you know things about Jay-Z that kind of give a window into how he works now. I mean, I actually spoke with this guy by the name of David Irby, who started out, selling crack with Jay-Z in Trenton, and he said that the defining characteristic of Jay-Z back in those days was he wouldn't give anybody any discounts for that $10 crack rock, man. Like, he wasn't going to give it to you for $9, even if you were his best friend. He was very he stuck to the list price, I guess. No discounts. So
And this
he's kind of
today. I mean, like, unless he's got a cut in the action that is full on somehow benefiting him, he doesn't do it.
And that's why he didn't participate with my book. And it's worked out for him really well, this attitude and this way of doing things. So it's almost hard to blame him. I mean, why when you've gotten where he is today, why would you change your stance around? But in terms of the music industry and for independent musicians, and I guess getting back to our discussion of is it better now in the era of the declining majors? I mean, and sort of having to handle your own business kind of thing, instead of letting somebody else handle it for you, maybe. I mean, I don't think it was very good before the way other people would handle your business. If you were a musician, I mean, look at the Beatles when they first started coming up. I mean, what a horrible deal they were signed to, and you can just look at all these countless legendary examples of musicians that got kind of screwed over by the record labels. And I mean, maybe now it's harder to become it's harder to get signed by a label, but it's also I think that the path, shall we say, I think that the path, there are more avenues for getting your stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's not clear which path is the best one to take. But I mean, if you look at an act like Pamplemousse, very much DIY. There are a lot of other DIY bands out there doing that kind of thing, and you don't even need a record label, and or if you want to go the label route, you can build yourself up on the internet and social media, and it's almost a more democratic way of getting your music out there.
Oh yeah, and you bring up an excellent example. I spoke with somebody 2-3 days ago. It was a studio up in Seattle, and we were talking about how difficult it is to track exactly how to make profitability for musicians currently. How are people doing this? What's the best way to do this? And they brought up the example of, and my point was, and I think you'll somewhat agree with me on this, that distribution may, and we'll see in the next couple of years definitely, distribution may just be an issue of marketing, right? It's a tool to market, whereas showing up to the gig, playing the gig, that's where your money's going to be made, or the majority of your money's going to be made, which is daunting to a lot of musicians, because a lot of musicians like studio time. And this person I was speaking with said, well, look at Steely Dan. You can always point to one band in a particular area, and it said, oh, these guys, they didn't have to tour, really. That's true, and there's examples currently that are like this. But for every one that's mentioned, I can give you 100 that are on the road, that are in the gigs, pushing their CDs into the hands of people that are attending the shows, pushing merchandise, because that seems to be where revenue's generated. Also, and this isn't just on the independent scene. If you look at the majors, even though this past year was horrible for them, 2010 was a horrible year for concerts. It's a lot were being shut down, or they just weren't putting people in seats. Couldn't put people in seats. CD sales are miserable. It appears that a lot of the profits they're making, the money they're making, are based off of ancillary deals and still concert revenue. Do you think that's the appropriate perspective to be taking at this point?